Good evening. We are learning Parshat Shemot. We are starting the new Sefer, the new book of the Torah, the second book, the book of Exodus. And we are on page 293 in Art Scroll Chumash. At the end of the book of Bereshit, in Parshat Vayechi, we learned that Yaakov passed away and was buried in Marat HaMachpelah, and Yosef passed away. He was the first out of 12 brothers to die, and Levi was the last. Yosef passed away at age 110 and Levi at age 137. And after the brothers passed away, the Egyptians slowly started oppressing the Jewish people, and this is where we find ourselves now. First, we have a quick review, and these are the names of the children of Israel who were coming to Egypt with Yaakov, with their households, and the 12 tribes are listed: Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zevulun, and Binyamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. Altogether, there were 70 descendants of Yaakov that are in Egypt. However, verse 6, Yosef died, and all his brothers, and that entire generation. All 70 people that entered Egypt died, except for perhaps one, and that is Yocheved, the lady that was born between the walls. As they were coming into the country, they were still by the security check, and she was born. And even though many years passed, she's still alive. She lived a long time. Verse 7, the children of Israel were fruitful, they teemed, they increased, and became strong, very much so. Altogether, 6 words are used to describe how Jewish people multiplied. And so the land became filled with them. So our sages say that this 6 times expression tells us that the Jewish ladies gave birth to multiple births, up to 6 children every time. And this was a special blessing. And next paragraph will explain why did God bless the Jewish people with such abundance. Verse 8, a new king arose over Egypt, who did not know Yosef. Some commentators say that really he was an old king, the same king that before. He just made new policies. He pretended, he behaved as if he doesn't know Yosef. And others say that this indeed was a new king, and not only new king, this was a new dynasty. A tribe overpowered the old Paro and established a new Pharaoh. And he really didn't know Yosef. And not only he didn't know, he didn't want to know. You might expect that a new king will learn the history of the country and will learn who are its allies and enemies, who should he be grateful to. But this particular Paro didn't care about history, and he didn't care about the fact that Jewish people saved Egypt. And that is why it says he didn't know and didn't want to know Yosef. Not only he was an ingrate, he didn't have appreciation for somebody who saved his country, Verse 9 tells us even more. He said to his people, behold, the people, the children of Israel, are more numerous and stronger than we are. Now, this is a common occurrence that first the nations that surround us, they point out that the Jewish people multiply too much. They have too many children. And they become stronger than we are. The nations complain. They use this as a pretense to attack the Jewish people. Why? Because really, there's nothing to fear. The Jewish people don't attack anybody. They're a peaceful nation. So be happy that there are more peaceful people in the world. Be happy that you have more good neighbors. But because jealousy is a very strong emotion and it's not so easy to overcome it, most people fall prey to it. And Egyptians were no different. They saw the Jews and they said, why do they have more children than us? Why are there more Jews in Egypt than there are Egyptians? And according to some historians, that is exactly what happened. There were more Jews in Egypt than Egyptians themselves. And why do Jews have more money? Why do they live in good neighborhoods? So that's what Paro said. Come, let us outsmart it, lest it become numerous, even more numerous, and it may be that if there is a war, they will join our enemies. So this is fear for future. Not only there is jealousy, but that jealousy causes people to find more faults with others. And they say, that's not fair. Why does he have more? And not only that, he might actually use his blessings against me. And they will wage war against us and go up from the land. Now this sounds very strange. Usually you would say they will wage war against us and kick us out. Paro doesn't say that. He says the Jewish people might fight against us and leave. So what's so bad about leaving Egypt? If you're scared of them, so just let them go. And we see that sometimes a nation is afraid that someone might leave the country. We know this was true for the 70 years that the Soviet Union was around. They were very scared that no citizens should ever leave the country because they proclaimed that communism is the great savior of humanity, and they wanted to prove it by saying that our citizens are the happiest. And if any person wants to leave our country and go somewhere else, that shows that we're not the greatest, and that shows that communism is not the best. And similarly was with Paro. Paro cared very much about his image in the eyes of other nations. He wanted to create an image that he is God himself, and therefore his country is the best and the strongest, and therefore nobody even wants to live anywhere else. It's very similar to the United States. Everyone wants to come to the United States and nobody wants to leave. Even though people say, oh, if so-and-so becomes the governor, I'm leaving. If so-and-so becomes the president, I'm leaving. But actually nobody wants to leave because it's so good here. Even though you can leave, nobody wants to. But Paro actually had a concern. He knew it wasn't true that he is a god, and he knew that Egypt might not be the best country in the world, And therefore, he was scared that somebody might leave. And therefore he said, I hate the Jews, and I want to make sure they never rebel, because if they do rebel, they might want to leave Egypt. And that explains why later when Moshe asked Paro, can we please leave Egypt for just 3 days? We're just going to serve our God and we're going to come back. Paro said, no, I can't let that go. Even for 3 days, I cannot allow anyone to leave Egypt. As the Midrash says, that never before in history of Egypt a slave escaped the country. Even a slave who doesn't want to be a slave, he wants to run away. Paro created the image of Egypt that even slaves are happy in Egypt. And even they never run away because they don't want to. That's what Paro said. So that's why Paro refused to let the Jewish people go, because it would reflect badly on Egypt. So much so that he was willing to suffer and let his people die just to play the role of the best president of the world. Okay, now we turn the page. Page 295. So, Paro, imagine. Another interesting thing. Paro doesn't say, let us kill the Jews, let us enslave the Jews. All he says is, let us outsmart it. Outsmart means that I'm dealing with equals, and we have a struggle, we have a fight, and I'm trying to outsmart. Why does he need to outsmart them? Why not just make a decree? All the Jews are becoming slaves. If you are the king, Paro, and you have army and parliament, why can't you? It's not like democracy. It's not like you have half of your government Jews. No Jews in the government. The king is not Jewish and doesn't have Jewish grandchildren. The whole Senate and Parliament are all not Jewish. Why can't they just make a decree to kill the Jews? That's a big question. And the answer is, following the same logic that we said before, Paro was very concerned about his image. He wanted to show that he is enlightened, that he is liberal, that he is democratic. He wanted to show the world that he cares for human rights. He would never oppress a nation. He would never enslave a people. So he had to make a trick. Outsmart them. Let's be clever. Let no one ever know what we're doing. This is very similar to Germans. Till the last moment they were trying to hide the fact that they were killing the Jews. Why? Why not just proclaim it? No. They were even burning their own books and destroying their crematoria. So Paro wants the whole world to think that he's humane. And by the way, that is one of the reasons why Egyptians were vegetarian. Because they wanted to show that we care for all life. We protect animals. We don't work the animals too hard. We rather would work people. We see history repeats itself again and again. So, how did they outsmart the Jewish people? They did what Lenin did. What did Lenin do? Lenin said, we would like to have free labor. We don't want to pay. So he announced that once a week the entire nation should volunteer for the great Mother Russia and do work for the country for free. And on the first such a volunteer day, and by the way, every time it was on Shabbat, and that was specifically done so that they remove religion from the Jews. The first Saturday that it happened, Lenin came out and started working. He picked up a beam together with another guy, and they took pictures of him and they drew paintings of him. And everyone who saw Lenin working said, oh, if the great Lenin, our father, our God is working, then for sure we will also. And the entire country for the next 70 years, every Saturday, volunteered to do communal work for free. And until I was 13, 14, I remember, even until then, both adults and school children and college kids had to volunteer. Some volunteered on Saturdays, some volunteered in the summer when they were off, like students and teachers. But the entire country was trained to work for free. And that's what Paro did as well. He declared that since Egypt is such a good country and they care for all human life and they support other countries and they export their food and they even save the world from famine in the past, they must grow more and they must advance themselves. And therefore they ask all their citizens to come and work for free. And Paro came out the first, and they transported him from one region to another so that everyone sees that Paro himself is volunteering. And of course, when everybody saw Paro, the king of Egypt, their god, working, every Egyptian started working as well, including the Jews. And in the meantime, the taskmasters recorded who did how much work. They followed every Jew and they wrote down. And then this became the norm. People would volunteer, and then slowly the people would stop volunteering except for the Jewish people. And they would say, you Jewish people are so good, you're supporting our society, you're the best, please continue. We're going to send Egyptians to do other jobs and you volunteer. And then they said, you know what, we can't afford to be without the volunteers. Now this volunteering becomes mandatory. Every Jew must work one day for free for the country. And then, slowly, they started adding days until the Jews were working all 7 days. And when the Jews started slacking off, the Egyptian taskmasters showed them the record that when they were volunteering, how well they were performing. And they said, you're not going to trick us. We know what you're capable of. And every Jew received his personal quota of what is his highest productivity rate. And that's how they outsmarted them. Little by little, they put them in a trap. So verse 11 on page 295 says, they appointed taskmasters over it in order to afflict it with their burdens. And the Jewish people built storage cities for Paro. 2 storage cities, Pitom and Ramesses. But, and now we find the answer why the Jewish people were so blessed. As much as they would afflict it, so it would increase and so it would spread out. The more Egyptians oppressed the Jewish people, the more God blessed the Jewish people, and they increased and multiplied until the Egyptians became disgusted because of the children of Israel. There were so many Jews, and every Jew represented success story, so that Egyptians, wherever they would look, they were jealous and jealous and jealous. And they became disgusted. Verse 13, the Egyptians enslaved the children of Israel with crushing harshness. They embittered their lives with hard work, with mortar and with bricks, and with every labor of the field. All their labors that they performed with them were with crushing harshness. Very similar to Germans. If you have slaves and you want them to produce a lot, so treat them well, feed them well, and let them rest and take care of them. No, crush them. If you crush them, they're not going to be able to work, and that shows that they didn't care for work. They cared to destroy the Jewish people. And that is why our sages say they built specifically Pitom and Ramses, because these two cities were built on quicksand-like ground, that the heavier the structure became, the more it would sink into the ground. And therefore, as they built, it would either sink in or it would crumble, because one part of the building would sink more than the other, and the building would crumble, and they would be punished for doing poor job, and they would be forced to build again, and the cycle would repeat itself. Again, the Egyptians were not interested in the high performance, but rather just hurting the Jews and also trying to make sure the Jewish people don't have a chance to reproduce. However, it didn't help. So Paro orders killing of the Jewish boys. Verse 15, the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, Shifra and Pua, when you deliver the Hebrew women, as they are giving birth, and the baby sticks out his head, if it is a son, you are to kill him. As soon as the head comes out before the baby, kill the baby, so that by the time the baby comes out, you can just proclaim, oh, it was stillborn, it came out like that, I didn't do anything. And if it is a daughter, she can live. So the king of Egypt gave the midwives a hint. How do you know if the baby is a boy or a girl? Before he comes out, only the head sticks out. So he gave them a trick from the position and shape of the head to know if it's a boy or a girl. One of the tricks was that as the boy is born, his face is looking up, and when the girl is born, usually she is facing the opposite. The boy is facing down, the girl is facing up. Now, verse 17. But someone is asking if that is true now, and the answer is, it is often true that there is such a phenomena where a baby, instead of facing like this, is facing the upside down. There are two ways. Sometimes the baby turns like this, and sometimes the baby turns like this. Okay, so it does happen. But the midwives feared God And they did not do as the king of Egypt spoke to them. And they caused the boys to live. The midwives, because they were Jewish, some say they actually were Jewish and they were Yocheved and Miriam. And some say they were not Yocheved and Miriam, they were actually not Jewish, but they converted. And they risked their life for the new nation that they joined, because they feared God. Imagine going against the government, going against the decree of the king himself. He's telling you, make sure there are no baby boys born, and you're producing birth certificates with 50% boys. What's happening? At least produce 25% and say some of them happen to survive. Why none of them are dying? 50-50. The king of Egypt summoned the midwives and said to them, what have you done? Why did you do it? That you caused the boys to live. So not only they risked their life hoping the Paro is not going to notice, he did notice. And not only he noticed, he actually summoned them. And he is demanding an answer. The midwife said to Paro, they try to play dumb, because the Hebrew women are unlike the Egyptian women. And that is a great praise for the Jewish women. The Jewish women are experts at giving birth. Even before the midwife comes to them, they have given birth. In those times, people gave birth at home. And they would invite the midwife, and they said, they're so quick and expert that by the time we come, they already have the baby in their hands and we can't kill him. And that again follows the idea that Paro cared very much about his image. He didn't want anyone to know that he's killing babies. So he tried to hide it. That is why they're using his own worry against him. You don't want anyone to know that we're killing babies, do you? That is why we can't kill them. By the time we come, the mother is already holding the baby. We can't kill him. Verse 20. God benefited the midwives. He blessed them. And the people increased and became very strong. Because the midwives protected the Jews were able to continue giving birth and multiplying. Verse 21. Now, it doesn't say yet how did God benefit the midwives. Some say the people increased and became very strong. That itself was a blessing. The midwives, Shifra and Puah, they loved the Jews so much they were willing to risk their life for them. And the fact that Jewish people are multiplying is the biggest blessing for the midwives. And now, according to the opinion that Shifra and Miriam were Shifra and Puah were Yocheved and Miriam, we now understand where does Moshe get his love for the Jewish people. That he is also willing to sacrifice his life for them. From his mother and his sister, Yocheved and Miriam. Now, verse 21 gives us a different interpretation. How did God benefit the midwives? And it was because the midwives feared God that he made them houses. God made them homes. Either physically, they were able to acquire nice houses, but specifically, we're speaking about not physical homes, but households, famous households. And they are the family of Kohanim and the family of the Leviim, the Levites, as well as the kings. Yocheved produced Kohanim